Hi everybody, thank you for coming. My name is Emily Bjorklund. I'm with, now we are called EnerKnol. I don't know if anyone noticed, we changed our name this week. So I'm with EnerKnol, the company behind New York Energy Week. Thank you for coming to our final steering committee meetup. We are very excited and can't believe that everything starts on Monday. To kick things off, so today we have two speakers. Our original speaker actually got delayed, well, David's always been an original speaker, but one of our other speakers has been delayed on a flight, so he won't be able to make it. But our first speaker, and actually to kind of set the stage, so we want to thank, and David is here representing the incubators of New York City. As you guys know, NYU Poly runs this incubator as well as several other incubators in the city, and they have been kind enough to host us for these meetups, and EnerKnol is a startup of the incubator. So we just want to thank the incubators, and David is here from the NYC EDC, where he is the Vice President and also Director of Clean Technology and Energy. So everyone, please welcome David.
Thanks, Emily. It's really a pleasure to be here. This is the second year that I've had the pleasure of talking to this group right in the lead up to Energy Week. And as Emily mentioned, I have the honor of working on some issues that I find very personally important as well as professionally challenging, which is how do we ensure that New York City and that the cities around the world are able to maintain a strong economy while having clean air, resilience to storms, adaptation to climate change, and doing all this in a way that is affordable and that promotes economic growth. So as Emily mentioned, I lead the Clean Technology and Energy team, and that really has two different functions, and I think both of them are pretty relevant to what Energy Week is doing. The first is to figure out how do we find the best solutions to some of these challenges, because energy is something that we all take for granted, and most people in New York City have no real understanding of how the power that moves their subway from point A to point B or keeps them comfortable during bad weather like this, all of that stuff, how that actually functions. And at the same time, that's under a lot of threat, as we all saw during Hurricane Sandy, and as we've seen through the polar vortex this year and all sorts of events. When there are disruptions, we really rely on the energy system to continue to provide for us. And solving that challenge requires not only investing in infrastructure, investing in education, so we have the next generation of workers at utilities and all of that sort of stuff, but also innovation. And that's why I think it's very fitting that we're here in an incubator tonight to talk about New York Energy Week. This incubator was the result of a partnership between NYU Poly and the City of New York through my organization, the Economic Development Corporation. This is actually the first in what's now a set of 15 incubators throughout New York City. And this includes things like media and tech companies, but also food manufacturing, arts, bioscience, and of course, energy and clean technology. So it was back in 2009, just across the street at 160 Varick, that NYC Acre first opened. And now in 2014, we've again partnered with NYU to create a new facility, the Urban Future Lab, which is just across the river in downtown Brooklyn. And EnerKnol is actually a great example here because they started in Manhattan, and they actually have space in both facilities and are doing things including bringing together the industry for New York Energy Week. And this is really just one example of how we need to provide support to innovators, whether they're a single person coming out of a university with an idea for better software for promoting energy efficiency, or whether it's a larger company that's looking at issues such as combined heat and power in New York City for greater efficiency. So next week, I think is going to be great for the city. It's a great way to focus attention on this topic that often does fly under the radar with everything going on in New York City. So I really want to thank all of the organizers and all of you for putting together New York Energy Week, and of course the sponsors. So we were lucky in the city to have great partners in the state. So NYSERDA, of course, has also helped fund a number of great initiatives around the city, in particular NYC Acre. And it's that kind of collaboration. It's not just about the public sector alone, but working with the private sector, working with universities and so forth, that's going to help develop the technologies that we need for a strong energy future. So I'm very happy to be here today. I think that I think that what everyone is working on here is so important to not only the sort of professional stuff that I've talked about, but last year during New York Energy Week, I missed a few of the events because my daughter was born right in the middle of the data jam. I was not at the data jam, luckily, but this year I hope to be. But so that, I mean, it's just, that really brought home to me how, looking ahead 30 years, 40 years, throughout my daughter's lifetime, and thinking about what is the energy, like how are we going to supply the energy that future generations need? How are we going to do that in a way that's equitable, that promotes economic growth, and that's resilient to whatever stresses come our way? So I think that I have a lot of reason to feel optimistic. It's a Friday night in New York City. There's a million other things you could all be doing. It's rainy. I got soaked on my way here, but it's really fantastic that you all are here working on these challenges. So again, my real thanks to all of you.
Q&A. If anyone has any questions, I'll do a couple minutes for if anyone wants to ask. Do you have any questions?
You guys do a really good job of supporting startups, but sort of what does the future look like for once the startup hits year 3, year 4, they're successful, and how do they continue to get support from VCs?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the goal of an incubator isn't to keep companies in the incubator, right? So with most of our programs, there's really the max amount of time you can stay in the incubator is about 18 to 24 months, which means that there does need to be a path after that. I think we've been very, very lucky in that a lot of companies have been able, within that period of time, to raise money to get space on their own, but it is a tough transition, and so we've been looking at things like step-out space, and I've got one project underway, not in the energy industry yet, but I hope we will in the near future, that provides sort of an incubator-like type experience, but for people that have 20 employees or something, because it is a big change to go from being in this great environment where it's very collaborative and you've got help with interns and mentors coming in and support from NYSERDA and all that, to suddenly needing to figure out every logistical detail on your own. So that's a really key thing. I think we want to find ways to partner with whoever can provide that sort of thing the best. So it's not necessarily that the city is going to support entrepreneurs indefinitely, but it's really filling out where are those gaps and then trying to bring in the resources to support.
Do you draw a distinction between incubators and co-working spaces? Does one do something that the other doesn't, or are they synonymous?
I would say that the incubator is kind of a subset of co-working spaces. So I would think of a co-working space could provide other services, but at the minimum, co-working is you're sharing space and working with other people. But for me to count something as an incubator, I would want to see mentorship available and have support that's not just about the real estate. Because real estate's important, but it's usually not the deciding factor in whether your company is successful or not.
I guess I have this question and ask already. So a lot of the energy initiatives were started under Mayor Bloomberg, and now we have a new mayor. Not that I would ever want you to back up your boss, but I was wondering, has there been any change now that we have a new administration, or all the programs just running business as usual?
So I joined the city right before the Mayor Bloomberg's third term. So I've been, it'll be 5 years in September, and I've had a number of different roles in that period of time. And I think on the one hand, it's a bit of a tough act to follow, of course. I mean, Mayor Bloomberg set out the city's sustainability vision, set these 30% carbon reduction goals and all that sort of stuff, set up the first incubator programs and all that. But I think it's also an area where there's a lot of commonality between the administrations. And during the campaign, there was no, regardless of which candidate you spoke with, that was not generally the controversial thing. It wasn't like, let's roll back all of our programs on energy. So Mayor de Blasio has been very supportive so far, and all of our programs have been continuing. I think going forward, there's going to be some new opportunities to do things like look at how we can invest in particular neighborhoods and in making sure that as the growth of the tech ecosystem has been fantastic for large portions of New York City, but there are certain boroughs that have not had as much economic growth. So I think there's going to be a focus on how can we make sure that there's opportunities everywhere. I think energy is actually a fantastic opportunity in that space, because it's certainly true that the New Yorkers who have the least money tend to pay the highest percentage of their income on energy. So that means that investing in energy efficiency for low-income housing, for example, will make a real difference in sort of people's take-home pay, and at the same time create the jobs in installation, but also hopefully create a new market for local startups and technology companies too.
You guys sort of have the reputation in the city for being like the oil and gas conversion guys. And I guess you've studied solar and a few other technologies, but basically most of the work has been with the oil to gas conversions and stuff.
I think
right?
you might be thinking of EEC.
Oh, I thought that's where you were
So
from.
I'm EDC.
Oh,
So there's
I'm
the
sorry.
Economic Development Corporation is.
I thought you were in the
So yeah, there's
EDC.
the
My
Energy
apologies.
Efficiency Corporation.
Sorry.
It's a very similar name, and until about 2 weeks ago, we shared the same office building.
Well, let me ask you this. Any idea how we get the guys at the EEC to get beyond the oil and gas focus and potentially, work on some of the other things like solar, ground source heat pumps, et cetera, that may in fact end up serving the city better over the long term?
Yeah, I think that. Well, one thing there is that program that started as I think you're probably referring to the Clean Heat program, which was really the effort to get the buildings using the dirtiest fuel oil to convert to cleaner fuel oil or to natural gas, but it didn't really go beyond that to whether it's ground source heat pumps or biofuels and all of that sort of stuff. But there's now a big potential. They're working very closely with the New York State Green Bank, and they, as of a couple weeks ago, relocated into the same offices with them. So I think that there will be much more potential to build on that and to look at things like solar thermal. My team has done 6 or 7 solar thermal pilots around the city, and we've published some papers to try to get that. Try to make sure that technologies like that they're not necessarily cutting edge technologies, but they have very good fundamentals. Trying to make sure that both business owners, building owners, as well as policymakers get that data, because the incentives are, for the most part, are less favorable for certain technologies like solar thermal. Some has to do with the structure of where fees are paid in on the system benefit charge and so forth, but there's a big opportunity to increase that.
NYSEG is going to be speaking at the energy efficiency event. Do you want to talk to them?
Excuse me?
NYSEG,
Right.
Yeah, they're speaking at the energy efficiency event. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so ask them next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a direct question, but just in light of the recent EPA carbon rule, what some of your organizations are, I guess, how they're internalizing it, and if there's any, focus on the kind of public comment period and where you see your organizations interjecting in that and kind of commenting on it.
Yeah. So the city is certainly reviewing that very carefully. The EDC, where I am, is not. We generally are not. We're actually precluded from lobbying and that sort of. So we don't generally submit the comments to the PSC or to the EPA and other agencies. But I certainly know that people are reviewing that. I think New York City has. There's both this. It's complex because there's the city people reviewing policy, but a lot of this ultimately gets decided in Albany. So there's a lot of dialogue both between sort of upstate and downstate there. I think it's great now that we have in terms of the leadership team at the state level, from Richard Kaufman to John Rhodes to the new head of the PSC, Zippelman, and others. There's a lot of great dialogue going on with the city. So I think that as the largest consumer of energy and the largest contributor to things like the system benefit charge, I think that our voice is heard pretty well.
Okay, great. Well, if there's no other questions, I think everyone say thank you. So while we wait for our next speaker to arrive, I just want to point out, well, first of all, as we thank the incubators, we'd also like to thank our beer partner, House and Hall, for words of wisdom about House and Hall.
No, that's all right. We're fine.
Okay, House and Hall
We do
around the
well.
corner if no one's ever been. It's
Right.
a lot of fun.
222 West House, and we have a big screens there with the soccer matches and everything.
Um,
Big, massive screens.
Great. Well, speaking of soccer, I think that's a good segue to our Dutch partners. So Tim's with the consulate, and he's just going to talk about one of the partner events that's going on next week that the Dutch consulate is hosting.
Yeah, so today, after 4 years of misery that we lost in I think we got a little bit of revenge, but I feel also a lot of things have changed in the last 4 years. And it's the Dutch national team that lost from the Spanish national team. I think what David also said, a lot of problems we face are not national challenges, but also a lot of urban challenges. So I think that's one of the primary reasons that the Netherlands has said, okay, we face similar challenges as New York does, as San Francisco does, but also other cities, for instance, in Asia. So we're quite well advanced in electric vehicles. We have a lot of good technology in the microgrid field. And on Tuesday we have an official New York Energy Week partner event in which we're going to showcase 12 different technologies. And there's still some places available for you to join. So if you're interested in microgrids, if you're interested in electric vehicles, and are you interested in how we implemented some of the solutions in the other side of the Atlantic, where people are craving about all the soccer matches. I think Vincenzo was sending it around again, I think in the New York Energy Week Meetup. RSVP, come join us. It's on the Tuesday, it's from 10 till 12. We have different presentations, and we provide lunch. Unfortunately, no beer. But we do provide lunch, so I think it's an excellent opportunity to talk to one of the top innovators, policy people and business people in the field in the Netherlands on both microgrids and electric vehicles. So, thank you.
You all know who I am, I'm Peter Garnett, and I am proud to be part of New York Energy Week. And one of the really exciting things about this year's New York Energy Week is the inclusion of a real oil and gas company that goes out there and drills real holes in the ground and makes everything run. So I'm very proud to introduce my friend and someone I've worked with for 10 or 15 years now? Too long. Dee Bampani, who is representing Brightling Energy. We work together in Washington, and she knows more about the energy business than I do, and there's not very many people who do. So, Dee?
Not true,
we
but
can give her
Thank you all. I wasn't expecting to speak this evening. My boss, Chris Faulkner, who's the CEO of Brightling Energy, based in Dallas, Texas, was expected to speak, but because of the bad weather, he's not landing until 8 p.m. So here I am. I do government and public affairs for Brightling Energy through a PR company actually called the Stevenson Group here in New York. And Peter's right. I spent more than 10 years, probably about 13 years covering energy in Washington as a reporter. And I sort of transitioned over pretty seamlessly to this side. Brightling Energy was founded in 2004 by Chris Faulkner, and he is the CEO, and he's the only independent that travels globally to talk about the safety and viability of fracking. We were in Washington, D.C. recently, and we spoke with the American Natural Gas Alliance, which, as you know, represents natural gas companies. And they were so excited about the work that Chris is doing because no one's really out there talking about how safe it is and the advancements in technology that make it so viable. And he talks about the different terrains in the different countries and the challenges and opportunities in those different countries. And so that's why we thought, New York Energy Week would be, a great place to talk to all of you, because this is a global conversation. Energy is not a conversation we should have in a vacuum. It's not a domestic conversation. It's absolutely an international one. And so when I spoke with Emily and when I spoke with Peter, I just thought, I went straight to Chris and I said, this is where we need to be, because this is an interactive group. We're learning, we're sharing, and this is probably the only conference that I know of where you can do that, where it's truly interactive. This year, Brightling is the sponsor. And one of the things that we're doing is Chris is speaking at the oil and gas breakfast that Peter is moderating. He's going to talk about fracking, among other things, and he's going to talk about the role of natural gas. I think it's all sort of tied in together. The other thing is Chris has produced a film called Breaking Free, and we're premiering that film on Wednesday at the Tribeca Screening Room. It starts at 6 p.m. We start with a reception at the Tribeca Grill. It's on the website. It's called Breaking Free, so you can RSVP. We'd love to have you. So there's a reception, there'll be the film, a Q&A with the producer, Dr. Ken Medlock, and then Chris will be signing books because on Monday, he's launching his book called The Fracking Truth. This is the reviewer's copy. It's all marked up by me, but it's really interesting, and I know I'm probably biased, but I did cover energy for so long, and I read these things with such a critical eye, and so hopefully you'll like the book as well. We'll be giving away free copies. I was going to bring copies here today, but I didn't. Sorry. But you can get them throughout the week. Chris is also speaking at closing ceremonies about the role of the changing dynamics of the power sector globally. And so, again, you can't talk about these things in a vacuum. It's not just what is the United States going to do, it's how is it going to interact with the rest of the world, and what is the rest of the world going to do? So we just look forward to Chris's comments. He'll be available for talking, interviews, whatever you want to do. He's very open, and he's not one of those oil and gas guys that's going to come in. You wouldn't even notice him in a room, to be honest. He's just a regular, down-to-earth guy. And to be fair, he's not the media-trained CEO. He is your average guy from Texas, from Dallas. He wears his cowboy boots, and he'll be just straightforward with you, just like he is in this book, which you'll receive during the week. So if y'all have any questions, let me know. Sure.
When half the time when I say I'm in energy, I hear about Gasland and Gasland 2. Is there a concise answer to those two movies?
I think the best answer is that a lot of those movies are developed based on fear. So no one goes in, they go in with a point of view. They want to gather as much evidence as they can, even if it's not fact-based, to implant fear in the minds of the masses. Fracking is not safe, we've got to stop it. And Chris has said this, it's not about fracking, that's a decoy. It's about oil and gas, and namely gas. People just don't want the use of fossil fuels anymore. They want to eliminate the use of fossil fuels. And if they can attack fracking in order to do that, they'll do that. So, sure.
Well, following up with your response to the gentleman's question then, is Breitling Energy at least willing enough to disclose all the materials and chemicals used in their fracking liquid to the U.S. government? That's one taboo thing that Gasland has been factual on, is the fact that one person, especially Pennsylvania, has disclosed any and all of the chemicals in their list of the fluids they use to break down the bedrock, of course. And that's led to a lot of sickness.
And I'll say, I'm really glad you asked that question because Chris is an environmentalist. I know it seems a little odd to say that about somebody that goes for natural gas, but he is an environmentalist. In fact, Breitling came up with this process, which we'll read about in the book, called EnviroFrac, and it's reducing the amount of chemicals, the amount of water used in the fracking process. Now, to your question about disclosure, I recognize that a lot of oil and gas companies say we have frac focus, and that doesn't seem to pacify any of the critics. Frac Focus is a website, it's a repository of information that where oil and gas companies disclose the chemicals they use in the fracking process.
All of them?
All of them. But you're right,
they like to cut corners.
Not cut corners, but I'll tell you something, that when Baker Hughes came out and said we're going to disclose everything, Chris went on the record to the media, he was on CNBC and some other networks saying, we applaud Baker Hughes. Because I go to these conferences where these meticulous engineers go through the fracking process and they try to improve it. Use less water, use less space, et cetera, and it's just ironic to me that while this advancement is going on and these conversations are going on among these meticulous engineers, you have Daryl Hannah tying herself, chaining herself to the gates of the White House. So that hasn't advanced. I mean, it's like the protests continue, but the process is becoming more efficient. And so,
Follow up then, Bolivia. If I know not everything's going to be foolproof, so there was an accident or there was some sort of an incident regarding the fracking procedure, the fracking mines, the fracking cases.
yeah.
Would they be willing to at least help out people who were damaged, affected by those fracking?
Yeah,
An issue that
yeah.
you touched on that other companies seem to ignore.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad you brought that up too, because, you know, Chris is very much about working with the community. I mean, like I said, he is, you know what he says? He says, one of the problems that the oil and gas industry has is it's got a bad reputation. I mean, let's face it, you've had oil spills. I mean, first of all, they get lumped together, oil and gas, and now even more than ever because you have associated gas or associated oil when you drill for gas. He makes a point to say, we haven't done a good enough job to educate the masses. It's just Chris Faulkner out there talking to people, you know, and then they've got to have more people like him out there talking, engaging. I mean, because it's not a frightening process, but I agree with you. If you don't know what's going in the well and what's going on, and people just come in with their trucks and everything and just, you know, seemingly destroy your roads and stuff like that, you're gonna be upset. So he's all about transparency, start to finish.
I do agree there's safe fracking, so that's why I asked.
Thanks. Okay.
Just, you touched on water use or more efficiency, and water could be potentially the big, more dear than oil by the end of the century. So one of the concerns of fracking is its water use. So does Chris or the company speak to that, or how they're working on minimizing water impact or things like that, just out of curiosity?
Constantly. And there are waterless processes that they talk about, you know, you can use there's the gel.
I mean, it's an issue for, they don't want to use all that water either if it's so expensive, right? I mean, the drier you can get it, the happier everybody is, I think, so.
But it costs money right now, and that's gonna advance fracking, and it'll become less.
Yeah, but I have a slightly different take on this. As someone who spent a lot of time kind of in Washington where there's a very clear energy kind of focus on policy, and then in Dallas where there's a very business focus, one of the things we're really trying to do here is surface the energy community in New York. As someone who's been in New York now for a while, how would you compare those two communities? How would you compare the focus?
I think there needs to be more. New York Energy Week is the perfect way to do that, because you really just need the conversation to be had. It's really simple. The people in Dallas need to understand that the people in Washington don't understand, period. And so you just have to educate Washington, and if you can get that far, then, I mean, that's a first step. I guess that's the best way to say it, but I can elaborate on that.
Okay, she's going to be here, so I'm going to leave you all back to your socializing. She's here to answer your questions, so she's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And pick up a copy of the book and come to the movie premiere.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.